You're listening to Counsel Culture, the Business of Law podcast by Byfield. I'm Lindsay Goldthorpe, Associate Director at the agency, and I am joined today by Ben Girdleston, Joint Managing Director. Ben, it's been a little while since we caught up last. Lots has happened in the news, as usual, but how have you been? What have you been up to?
Been really busy. I mean, everyone at the agency, both on the litigation and the crisis and the day-to-day side, we are pedal to the metal at the year end. I know that we say this every year, but it is really busy, which is super exciting and sort of bodes quite well. Despite the, I'm not going to say economic headwinds, but the slight economic confusion of last week's budget, and in particular the build up to it, what may or may not have been known and said, etc., has not really kind of overshadowed that too much. And I know that we'll talk about it in a bit, but I was personally pleased that the sort of threatened LLP tax didn't materialise, because I think it could have been very challenging to the profession generally. So I was glad to see that, while obviously remaining strictly apolitical. But actually, the past, I think I was last on 3 and 4 weeks ago. My thoughts on conversations with current clients, potential clients, and people that want to work with us, it's been absolutely dominated by private equity. We talked about this really since the spring, but it is now becoming very real. We've seen the news on McDermott, which I think we may have spoke about last time, but also I was lucky enough to be invited to speak at the big IBA law firm management conference last week at the Law Society, and the keynote speech was just given around private equity, what private equity are looking for, what types of deals they're looking for, crucially, what private equity investment will mean for law firm partners, both in the near and short term. And some of the numbers that we've seen of 9,000 firms, and the majority of those having somehow let it be known that they want to have a conversation about private equity and understand what it might mean or not for their business, tells you that this is absolutely huge. And I think the stories that we've picked to cover today, I think all of them have got some reference to MSOs or private equity in them. Even the coverage of the Ashurst Perkins merger that we've seen over the last week after the initial announcement has got private equity, in and around that space. Not that they're going to invest, but that what the context of private equity investment might mean for that particular deal, etc. Can't really remember a subject apart from, like, I don't know, something like the pandemic or whatever, just creeping up on us and becoming so dominant so quickly. I think that if you're not talking about private equity or mergers at the moment, you're playing a minority sport.
Why do you think that it's suddenly the topic du jour? Because, as you said, that you can't really escape it. It's being featured in the majority of coverage that we're seeing, even if it's to say firm X isn't considering PE investment. What is it about the topic all of a sudden that seems to have captured everybody's attention?
I think there's absolutely one true answer, and it's this: that when private equity doesn't decide to invest in a sector overnight, they spend years crunching data, absolutely years crunching data, and they've all got, all the top funds have got very good, data analysis, but it takes time. And once they decide that a sector is ripe for investment, we saw it with care homes, I don't know, 15 years or so ago, then they come in quickly. And I think we are now just seeing that point. So it's just a very real reason why it's dominating the agenda so much, because there's a lot of potential deals bubbling, because we've had, a long period of research, data crunching, all that sort of stuff. That's finished. They're coming. I think the amount of deals which we're going to see next year, knowing private equity like I do, will be massive.
Yeah, and the sector's relatively stable. It's kind of, one of the oldest professions. It seems like a relatively safe bet from a PE standpoint. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many of these rumored conversations or conversations play out over the coming months, and we'll certainly keep following it for sure.
Yeah, and I think the big challenge is, again, listening to this keynote speech I heard last week, is all around partner drawings. The model very much is take money out, put money into the business, take money out of the business, earn fees. It's going to change quite a lot. That money will circulate in law firms in a very, very different way under private equity. How it comes in, how it's processed, and how it comes out. I think the fundamental, almost sort of culture, the financial culture of management of firms is going to, not just with the private equity investment, it's going to change massively over the next couple of years. It'll be really, really interesting to see. So all those classic metrics like PEP, our revenue per lawyer, turnover, all that. Well, turnover is probably the one that won't change, but the revenue per lawyer, profit per equity partner, lockup periods, build debt collections, all that stuff is going to really change and tighten up over the next few years. So I think any kind of law firm finance nerds, of which there are quite a few, will have a good old time over the period to come looking at that change.
Moving on to look at a couple of the stories that we have been following over the past week or so. You alluded to the big news regarding Perkins and Ashurst. Another story that we saw this week was A&O Shearman's first post-merger accounts, which I think paint quite a rosy picture. Whether that first year is enough to dictate longer term success will be seen, but certainly at face value they look good. It seems to be going well. What's your take on the merger, and do you think that this is a potential success story that others will look to model themselves on?
Oh, I think it completely is. You always have to look at numbers at the end of the day. They don't lie. Sometimes as ever, when clients lose partners to other firms and journalists will say, well, what's going on here? Is there a story? And it is completely true. You say, look at the numbers at the end of the year, because they will tell you how well the firm is doing, how well it's performing, etc. And I mean, it's such a huge combined firm. It's hard to keep track of all the people leaving, and there's been quite a few. I'm not going to speculate as to whether certain people are managed out or not. It's not my business, and I don't know. I'm not involved with either firm. But what these numbers do tell you, and they are impressive, is that the management of the firm is seemingly, I think, in quite good hands. And they've obviously made some very tough decisions, and people have left, and people have joined, and they seem to be working out. So I would say a very strong yes, that the merger probably is a success. And I think that's good, because we want to see more of them, right? I mean, if it had gone very wrong, then you perhaps might not have seen the Perkins Ashurst news, or whatever the next HSF Kramer is. So for all of us that want to see more, transatlantic mergers, I think most people do, because they're quite exciting. I think people should be pleased that this combined firm has done well in its first year of operation, because I think without getting too technical, the outlay that they will have made in IT, and you don't even get your head around trying to merge the two IT systems will be like, and all the other kind of back office functions and things. The investment in that, in branding, in the built environment, and materials, and even pens, whatever else, the outlay of that is vast, and to still turn some impressive numbers, I think is good. Fair play to them. Well done.
Another interesting aspect of the merger story more broadly that we were discussing before is all the work that needs to happen to bring it to life. In particular, the communications around the merger. How much of a task is it to manage a process such as a merger between two large firms? It feels like a full-time job within itself, right?
Yeah, you have implementation teams. What you have is people on each side whose lives are going to be spent delivering a merger, mainly technology, and operations in terms of the built environment, offices, etc. That's, having been through this, it's absolutely vast. It will take people will give a year of their lives to solely doing this and getting it right. And the financial outlay and commitment is really something. It's an awful lot. Then there's some painful stuff. I mean, particularly if there's some crossover in offices, you can't have two, I don't know, heads of communications in the same office and all that sort of stuff. And there has to be, sadly, some right sizing or downsizing, have you looked at? That's not easy. You've got all the HR stuff that goes with that. I mean, it's not just the lawyers being able to come together and deliver, advice for global clients to allow, the infrastructure to allow them to do that is huge. And it takes a lot of time to get that right, even with smaller firms, to be honest with you. I worked at, right at the beginning of my career, I worked at Lloyd's Bank, which I think had merged with TSB like a decade before, and they still hadn't integrated their IT systems, which tells you a story. And IT was a lot more simple then.
Yeah, I many moons ago when I joined SJ Bowen, as it was formerly known before the merger with KWM, there was a massive cultural integration to think of as well. It was a British firm merging with a Chinese Australian firm, as it was at the time, and it was fascinating because you suddenly have lots of new colleagues and you need to know the best way of communicating with them. Obviously, none of us were going to be able to speak Mandarin overnight, but we did start lessons, and we did start learning kind of basics of communication. And it was a really, really nice initiative to start paving the way for both firms to come together and it to feel organic, I guess. So yeah, shout out to all the communications people working through all of these mergers that we see in the headlines.
100%.
Another story that caught our eye this week was the sad news that Clifford Chance has announced plans to cut around 10% of its London business service roles. And interestingly, it's citing the increased use of AI for the streamlining. It seems to be the way that things are heading. AI is another talk with PE. It's in the headlines kind of every day. Is this indicative of a trend you see of the impact that AI will be having on the law firm model long term?
So I think it's, not just in legal, but across all service industries, it's inevitable that in the short term, AI will lead to some downsizing and certainly less new job opportunities. I don't think anybody could deny that's true. But it's quite easy and simple to try and place all these changes at the door of AI. Yes, it's a catalyst. Yes, it's a factor. It's quite interesting, actually, just before we were about to come on air, if that's the right term, there was a story breaking in the FT that 32,000 jobs had been, private companies in the US had shed 32,000 jobs in November, and then it said more to follow. It literally said that data, and I couldn't resist it. I flicked to the reader comments, and it said, "Oh, this is AI. This is this is the AI effect, etc., etc." Not necessarily 100%. And it's difficult if you're a law firm leader, isn't it? That you have to be seen to be adopting AI, and increasingly in pitches, the things a law firm's usage of AI is asked for and detailed. People need to say detailed in quite a compelling way how they use AI. And if you are really pushing your skill in using AI, then you're not going to need the same number of people before you adopted it. But in the Clifford Chance story, I think they talk about a couple of other factors as well, don't they? I think they opened hubs in Poland and India as a reason for the cuts. And I would say they would be as substantial as AI, but everybody wants to read about what AI means from a positive and negative perspective. We've talked before. I don't necessarily predict that there'll be the bloodletting that people think, but it is absolutely true that you've got to train people. And my worry is that people use AI at the expense of hiring and training people, but AI can only take you so far. If you are if you've got a commercial view, you know that you need to hire graduates and trainees and stuff, not because they're going to be amazing this year, next year, even the one after, but unless they leave you, they certainly will in 4 or 5 years' time. You need to be able to have an associate base or a senior associate base, and they have to start from somewhere. And you can't just rely on hiring and lateral hiring from others. You've got to be commercial enough to know that the industry needs to train junior lawyers and junior business services staff, because AI can only take you so far. And I think we're just getting to a point where we don't really understand what the right balance is. Nobody really knows yet. So it's very easy to pin two things to happen. One, for firms to take rather short-term positions on AI and thinking, well, let's just exit people because we've got AI to do this, and not really think that you actually do need people 4 years qualified, 5 years qualified in whatever, whether legal or something else. But equally, just to pin the door at AI of everything that changes. I think it's really too early to really know the answer to this.
Yeah, and the thing I find interesting as well, and I'll try and find the source so I can drop it in the notes when we publish, but is not just the jobs that will be either lost or cut, but how AI will reshape pathways into law. So I think we've seen that firms are able to cut back on some of the trainee roles because they're now able to use AI to, for example, compare contracts, and that will free up time for junior lawyers rather than replace them. So what are you going to need to be upskilling your lawyers in when they don't have to do this kind of admin heavy work? And I think as a people first business, as a term you kind of keep seeing with regards to the profession, I don't think that AI is kind of an existential threat, but it's certainly going to reshape the way that things work for the long term. And I think the firms that are thinking about that now are going to be the ones that get ahead.
I would hope and expect that training lawyers to use AI well is a substantial undertaking, and one that is worthwhile. And I think the ability to use AI is a skill that you can monetize and sell. We've all used it ourselves. It's very easy for AI to do your thinking for you, but it's quite challenging to get AI to do what you need it to do, I think. And that act itself is something that you can monetize and sell. So I hope you're right. I hope that firms see the need, to make sure that people are using AI in the right way, but equally that they need people that are 3, 4, 5 years in, and it's worth investing in, in trainees. I would expect so. But every kind of amount of job losses you see, every job loss story, every lack of hiring story is going to be pinned to the door of AI, and I think the answer is not that much.
Okay, and last but not least, it was a budget that was memorable for all the wrong reasons. I think we could probably spend a long time talking about the OBR leak, accident, however you want to term it. But I think that industry breathed a collective sigh of relief when Rachel Reeves ultimately dropped the much trailed ideas of imposing national insurance on LLP partners, which, if it had gone through, would have pushed some rates above 50%. I think there was speculation that as a result, the US would benefit to the detriment of UK firms. Everybody was waiting with bated breath, and it was a bit of a damp squib, but a good one. How do you think the mood has been since the budget generally and in the sector?
I think it's been chaotic, to be honest with you, in terms of generally post budget. And again, not wanting to move into party political broadcasting or into political podcast territory, the lack of coordination around the government from a comms perspective, wherever your politics lies, has been pretty breathtaking. And I have some sympathy with Rachel Reeves. I've actually was involved when I was in house with a select committee hearing of which she chaired. It was around the gender pay gap. Boy, a couple of things. She was fierce, really, really well organised, and knew exactly what she was doing. I was on the wrong end of it, but she was very, very impressive. And I think the fact that she is kind of having to change her tune quite a lot, seemingly floundering, and then this mess with the OBR, I think that she's just almost not the front. That sounds a bit dramatic, but she's just an easy target for some of the lack of good communications going on at government level. So, sorry, I'm slightly going off topic here, but I think for comms professionals listening, I really, really don't think she is the issue. I think it's more the machine, and those that are old enough, my vintage or older, will remember obviously Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson back in '97, and as we moved into the millennium. Gosh, they got this stuff right. They really, really got this stuff right. And you have to have a consistency of message to be able to have a strategy. You can have a strategy, but if you've not got a consistency of message, the strategy doesn't land. It's all over the place. And that's the same in law firm communications as it is in political communications around a budget. So yes, just to round off, I think everybody listening hopefully had our invite to Hacks and Flacks next Wednesday night, the 10th, at 6 p.m. at a venue called Harold in Farringdon. Just check our LinkedIn out. It's all over there. We'd love to see as many people as there as possible. It's always a super event every year. So please come along and say hi to Byfield, colleagues, former colleagues, competitors, etc. See you there.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. Good to catch up as ever. And thank you for listening, everyone. Until next time.
You've been listening to Counsel Culture, the Business of Law podcast brought to you by Byfield. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and join us again next week, where we'll be discussing some more of the biggest stories in the legal sector.